Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Death in the Crone by Mackie, and this is hosted by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The young man unlocked the metal door and let it swing open, leading the old, homeless woman inside. She stood on the threshold, a small wizened thing, wearing clothes that were never hers and stinking to high heaven of her own and others' filth. "You are one crazy kid, you know that?" she told the young man standing next to her, as he struggled a moment to remove the high-tech key that never quite fit the lock from his door. The young man flashed his youthful smile at her, tossing his newly freed keys and his umbrella onto the glass coffee table in the open living room. Without a further response, he walked past the island. That was the only thing separating the kitchen from the living room, to a refrigerator that shone dull silver in the dim light. She stood still in the doorway, clinging onto the frame to fight her instincts to run. The room would have been less scary if it had been filled with torture equipment. Instead, there was a dark wood dining room set. Tall, throne-like chairs stood just a few feet from the doorway. To the left was a dark leather couch with a clear glass coffee table. Both pieces of furniture faced a wide, flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. The couch sat on beige carpet, while the dining room set sat on wide square blocks of smooth stone-like tile with no wall in between to separate the two rooms, like a sane person would expect. It was pure, uncomfortable luxury. The extreme contrast of her to the world in which she now stood was so keen, even she was embarrassed by it. The feeling went all the way through her hardened shell that told the world she didn't care what it thought of her, to touch the gentle little girl she had once been, and in some ways still was, underneath. "Come in, shut the door," the kid said from the kitchen. He seemed to be fetching 2 glasses and a bottle of something from his chrome fridge, setting all 3 on the island counter. 3 red-topped stools waited on the opposite side for some glamorous woman in a too short little black dress and heels to sit upon it. Not a woman dressed in rags, old enough to be his grandmother. When he didn't move, he left the kitchen to come to her once more. He smiled his gentle smile, the one that convinced her to take him up on his offer in the first damn place. As the smile washed over her, it made her insides melt into warmth. Most people would shun her at first sight, try to keep upwind and at least 5 feet away, more, if possible. It had been like that for too many years. This kid, instead, had come up to less than a foot beside her, both in the alley and now as she hovered in his doorway. Gently, he touched her shoulder to guide her inside and shut the door behind her. "Would you like some water?" he asked. With a sense of doomed finality, he locked the door behind her. "Whatever," she answered and proceeded further inside. If he didn't care about the crud on her tattered shoes staining his pretty carpet, then she didn't give a rat's ass either. She set her whole body down into one of the stools, which seemed to satisfy him, and he continued with that angelic smile as he poured out 2 glasses of bubbly water from the fancy bottle. While he did that, she studied him again in the light coming down from the 3 hanging lamps over the island counter. He was beautiful. Too beautiful in her mind. Tall and thin without being gangly. The word lithe floated through her mind. He wore dark clothes, a fine black button-up shirt that was open at the top, and matching black slacks with dark, square-toed shoes she had seen models wear in magazines. His hair was the longish style that only beautiful men could pull off without it looking like a mullet. The hair itself was dark, framing a perfect chiseled face with nice cheekbones and a sharp chin. His eyes were dark blue, so dark the pupils were hard to see. They were as equally hypnotic as his smile. To her, they seemed like eyes that had seen too much, full of understanding instead of judgment. He had long fingers that handled the bottle of water expertly, and she imagined for a minute those hands wrapping around her throat, choking the life out of her while she got to look up into those dark, dark eyes. She snorted at the image. "Look, kid, I know this has to be a part of some ritual for you or something, but you don't have to play nice with me before you do whatever the fuck it is you plan on doing to me. I don't really give a damn," she said defensively. "I understand," he said, and slid the glass of water over to her on its own fancy-schmancy coaster made of cork. "Drink that up. We have all night, and you'll need it." "What is this bullshit?" she grumbled, but picked up the water anyway and stared down into it. Probably drugged anyway, she said. Before she could take a sip, he plucked it back out of her hands with those long fingers and took a healthy gulp instead. What the fuck? You fucking with me? She snapped. Some sort of power trip, you ass? See, not drugged, he said and held it back out to her to take. She eyed him and the glass with hateful suspicion for several minutes. The last thing she wanted was to reach out for it and be made a fool again. She had known several so-called men who would think yanking it out of her grasp the height of hilarity. I reach for that, you will just snatch it back again, she concluded bitterly. Nodding again with those damn understanding eyes, he set the water back on its coaster and picked up his own to drink. He leaned against the far counter, putting himself out of snatching distance, and watched to see what she would do. She ignored the water. Don't like feeling like a goddamn lab rat, she grumbled again. You've got me up here, kid. Now what do you want with an old bitch like me? I told you, I'm interested in you. I want to help you, he answered and sipped his water, his eyes roving her being. God knows what he could be looking at. The old woman stared down at her wrinkled, scarred hands. The skin had gone thin so that her bones showed underneath. She hated looking down at her hands. She never recognized them. Over most of her body, she wore an old, burnt orange jacket that was made for a man 3 times her size and went down to her knees. She liked it because it kept her warm on cold nights like this one, if she tucked her knees into it. Dirty white sneakers that were falling apart held her feet. On her legs were 3 pairs of sweatpants layered over each other. She had just as many layers of shirt under the jacket, and her mess of gray, dirty, greasy hair was stuffed up under an old black knitted hat that she hadn't taken off for a long, long time. It was probably fused her head by now. She hadn't seen herself in a mirror in years. She didn't have to. God knew how bad and ugly and old she looked, and this dumb fool just kept smiling at her as if she was... What? What the fuck are you looking at, you freak? She snapped again, with the old reliable defensiveness that was meant to keep her safe and away from harm. He laughed out loud. Genuinely laughed as if she had just told the world's greatest joke. There was no malice in it, and it left her stunned. I'm looking at you, of course, he said in that cryptic way that he had been doing for the last hour, never quite answering her questions. He had picked her up in the alley only a few streets away. She had been digging through garbage when he came up beside her, an umbrella over his head to keep the light, cold drizzle of late fall from coming down onto his beautiful self. You want to come home with me? He had asked after he had stared at her for a few minutes. She was hurting for another fix or another drink, anything to keep the demons away. The need was so great that her instinct to protect herself gave way to the addiction, much as it had most of the years of her adult life. She would have followed Lucifer himself if he had come a-calling. Why am I here? She finally asked when the silence between them became annoying. Why do you think you were here? He asked back. Because you either want to fuck an old cunt or because you're sick in the head or something, or you want to murder me in some horrible way because you would miss street trash. So whichever it's going to be, can we just get on with it? She shouted and swiped the glass of water off the counter and made a satisfying wet crash on the floor. Because it don't much matter to me either way. I'm done with living. He didn't move when she threw away his hospitality water. Didn't get angry either, just studied her, then slid his own glass of water across the counter to replace it and waited. She shot him an angry black look, then picked it up. For a moment, she almost threw it after the other. It too would have been satisfying, but she didn't. This time she stared at the crystal-clear liquid with its tiny bubbles and started to drink it. It actually tasted so good in her dry mouth. She couldn't remember the last time she had simply drunk water. As she gulped it down, she had to resist the urge to slosh it all over her face as well. How old are you? He asked after she came up for air. Too damn old. Should have died years ago, she answered. Especially after all the drugs you've done, he stated simply. Again, no judgment, just facts. She still reacted as if he was judging her anyway. You've been spying on me, you fucking animal? He held up his right hand, letting the sleeve fall back to show his right wrist. He tapped the wrist with the finger of his left hand. You've got scars. I bet they go all the way up, don't they? He said. Everyone's got fucking scars. She drank the last dregs of the water. It tasted so good she didn't realize it was gone until she had tried to keep drinking after it had turned to air. "Do you like doing it?" he asked. He retrieved the glass after she sat it down and refilled it from a new bottle. "What, drugs? No. Who the fuck does? But the demon's got to be fed. I owe him that much," she answered. "What's with the questions?" "What demon?" "What?" "You said the demon's got to be fed. You owe him." "Owe him what?" She set the glass gently onto the counter, becoming hyper-aware of the shake in her hands, her eyes drifting away to the other place, the place long in the past, the place where the demon had made its home and cried with a baby's voice. "I owe him for keeping the pain away." The young man honored the silence around that truth. The creeping feeling in her skin that had been slowly building was impossible to ignore now. It was coming for her, eating her alive, piece by piece. She'd waited too long. It would come for her and eat her heart. It would leave her dead soon enough. She needed the next fix to ward it off. The idea of her heart stopping, her life ending in writhing pain made her shudder. She had seen it before. Dying of withdrawal, even the corpses looked as if they were in agony. That wasn't what she wanted. Why wouldn't he simply end this already? It was becoming too hard to focus on him. The light was blinking in and out as she tried to stare at him with his hands braced on the counter behind him, his dark hair and dark clothes made out of the flashing darkness. She could see him for what he was now, the demon himself. He had come for her at last. He was beautiful. "Come, it's time to take a shower," he said suddenly, straightening up to come around the corner. "Shower?" she asked, blinking as she tried to bring back awareness to herself. The darkness was melting off of him. Panic rose in her. A small voice said she should run now, but why bother? She came to die by this monster's hand. She was going to do just that. He took her wrist in his hand and pulled her to her feet. "It's through here. Follow me, beautiful girl." He led the way to a doorway just past the living room. "I should fucking run out the door right now," the old woman mumbled to herself and slowly creaked her old bones up to standing. The right knee took its time working correctly, and she limped a few steps before it started smoothing out into a proper gait. He didn't comment or rush her. A gentlemanly monster. He led her into the bedroom. It was much like the living room in that it had the beige carpet and high-end motif. A king-size bed was the main feature, and it was made up neatly with heaps of pillows and a black comforter. There was a large mirror over the head of the bed, and out of habit, the old woman sidestepped so she couldn't see herself in it. Again, the young man didn't comment, just led her to the right through another entryway. He slid up a light switch to halfway as he passed, not that she could really see it. What she did see was the darkness of a ritual room, lit with fire all around. She didn't stop, but double-blinked. The room changed as her demon, or was it a monster, stopped and let go of her. It was a bathroom, not a ritual room. "A bathroom makes sense," she muttered. If he was going to kill her, bathrooms were easier to clean up. "You're going to get clean in here." He reached into the shower and turned the water on. The shower itself was in its own little room made of clear glass. A rain shower head began spouting water down, and soon it filled the space with steam as the water made gentle plinking sounds on the faux stone tiles. The young man shut the glass door and turned to her, still smiling that goddamn peaceful, beautiful smile. Then he came up to her and started popping the snaps on the orange coat. She jumped and flinched away, trying to bat his hands away, but her own had become useless with shaking. "What the fuck are you doing?" "Undressing you," he said simply. "I can do it myself." But she couldn't. Her fingers wouldn't cooperate. "You want me to shower, right?" she asked, embarrassed. It wasn't a question she wanted answered, and he didn't answer it, but simply waited. After a few moments, she gave up and he took over. "I gotta get all clean for you," she continued to mutter. Staring down at the ground, she realized the floor was writhing beneath her shoes. Better than looking at the walls as the monsters tried to push their way through the flames burning there. She felt like the small girl she hadn't been in years. Too late, those old memories surfaced as well, and she was 12 again. Not innocent enough to not know what was coming. "You need to get clean, yes. Come on, you'll feel better." Take 10 years off of you, the beautiful demon quipped, and he reached out to pop off more buttons. She stood there and let him, not moving or responding as he undid the coat and withdrew it off her arms. The smell got worse even to her blinded senses. It's been a long time, she said in a small, shy voice, though whether she meant bathing or sex, she wasn't sure. Both were true. It's okay. Here, I'll dim the lights down even more so it's more relaxing. He moved to slide down the dimmer switch. Now there was a warm twilight in the room, serenaded by the gentle patter of water. The monsters growled in the ground, and the walls quieted with the light. Patiently, almost like a nurse, he undressed her, one article of clothing at a time. As each piece came away, it felt like her skin was being flayed off and removed until she stood before this beautiful demon, her small, wrinkled, drooping body uncovered for his dark eyes to see. The lesions on her skin had gotten worse, scaly and red and sore.